Hello everyone and welcome back to my MCU rewatch. We are recording still from our last session, and today we are going to be talking about Captain America the First Avenger and possibly a couple other movies that I've rewatched already. I don't know if we're going to be talking about all of the ones I rewatched so far. I'm up to Thor the Dark World, but we're going to keep going and see how long this takes. These aren't scripted, these are just me talking. So hopefully you've been enjoying it. Hopefully you found something interesting about it, because I've been enjoying my time rewatching these. So we're going to be talking first, of course, about Captain America the First Avenger. This one is probably one of my favorites in the MCU. It's definitely my favorite from the first phase, I'd say. Primarily because I just like Captain America as a character more. I think he's more interesting than other characters. I think he has more of like a solid moral backbone, which to me is at least somewhat more interesting than characters who are just like selfish and that's it. That's their entire personality, is just they're selfish and annoying. But overall, rewatching this movie was a good experience because I think that this one is kind of slept on. I think this has a lot of good elements to it. I think first off, the period piece elements are very unique for the MCU. I really don't think most of the MCU movies have gotten this close to having such a very distinct tone, especially like later movies. Like even when they try to do more interesting elements of the culture, I feel like this one has a very distinct, like clear tone to it, which I always appreciate. In terms of the performances, of course, I love Chris Evans as Captain America. The effects of him, like when he's skinny, are a lot better than I would have expected them to be, especially like thinking back on it. I was like, I didn't think they were going to be that good, but to be honest, they hold up better than a lot of like deepfake technology now, so that's pretty cool. I think, of course, Haley Atwell is great as Peggy Carter. I miss the Agent Carter show so much. I will take Agent Carter over Captain Carter. Not that there's any speed contest, they're both great, but in general, from the content we've gotten, Agent Carter was better than What If. Don't at me. Obviously, Hugo Weaving as Red Skull was a good casting choice, even if apparently he didn't have a great time with it. We have, of course, Tommy Lee Jones is here. We have, of course, Sebastian Stan, how can I forget that? Dominic Cooper is great as younger Howard Stark. Toby Jones is fun as not MODOK, the other one. Oh my god, Zola. I can't remember any names right now. So yeah, that was all great. The Howling Commandos are fun too. They're just sort of there, but they're a cute little addition. So overall, fun cast. And I think that I add on to this setting of the movie and this idea of the movie. I will say that the plot is a little simple, but I appreciate certain elements of it. I like the fact that Steve started off as this propaganda tool. I think that it's a good way of tying to the origins of the comics, sort of this idea that yes, there is a such thing as American propaganda, and yes, Captain America is propaganda at his core. Even if it's good propaganda, even if it's seen as propaganda for a good cause, it's still propaganda. So that's a very nice element to add in. I think that would really elevated the movie. I like that there's this sense that war isn't really idolized. There's this sort of sad truth to it all, that even when it's like you go off and go to war, they're still like, the soldiers aren't happy. They're not happy to be part of this environment. And so when Cap like shows up and is all like, how many of you ready to help me punch old Adolf on the jaw? And they're all just staring at him like, dude, we're going through hell right now. Why are you joking right now? This isn't fun. I think it definitely adds more of a commentary element to it. I do think that there is a setup that isn't followed all the way through, though. I think war was sort of set up to be this idea that it breaks down someone that even has a high moral standards. And it's kind of frustrating that Steve doesn't get broken down, really, because when Bucky dies, that should be like a clear signifier that he's entered into a spot where he's going to get more violent. He's going to get more aggressive because, that's how people are. And I think that there was a clear twist you could have done where at the end Red Skull points out you've been killing my men left and right. You came in here saying you weren't going to kill anybody. You didn't want to kill anybody. You just don't like bullies, but what stops you from being the bully? And you could have also talked about the Japanese internment camps in America. You talked about the fact that the Manhattan Project was going on as Steve was fighting Hydra. There's so many things you could have done to sort of call out the idea that war is ever a good guy wins. There is no winning war. War is a bad idea that breaks down even the kindest, most pure-hearted men. And I think that it could be more interesting than having Steve just remain this pure 100% good guy all the way through, and before he just ends up in the future. Oops. So overall, it's not a bad movie. I think that it definitely holds up a lot better than I think people even gave it credit for at the time. I think there was maybe a little bit of fatigue with Thor coming out the same year as that. Now, obviously, we're a lot more used to it, but I think back then people were like, another Marvel movie? Okay. I think this one's definitely getting some more positive attention. I think more people are acknowledging that this movie is better than they gave it credit for, and I appreciate that because it's one of my personal favorites. I like the tone of it, I like the feel of it. So overall, thumbs up from me. I think it's my favorite one of the first phase so far. I don't know if it's the best one, but it's my favorite so far. I first saw The Avengers in 2012, opening day, May 4th, and it was like a major defining moment in my childhood. It was such a hyped moment. It was such like a, oh my god, these characters, they're coming together for the first time in a world where you can only dream about the concept of Batman versus Superman, or a full team up movie or any sort of crossover of any kind. This was like a major deal. This is a big deal. Now it's a little bit more frustrating than it is something I appreciate because it feels a little cheap, but at the time it was wild. And I remember having such a good time going with my mom to see it. We went and got Wendy's afterwards. We even got free movie tickets out of it. It was like a certain amount of movies we saw, so we got you free tickets, which was really nice. But rewatching it now specifically, because even 2 years ago I still remember really liking it, but like right now specifically, all the elements that I still like. I like the way that the characters are written in this movie because they all feel distinct and they all feel like they have a reason to argue with each other. There's a clear sense that like Cap is more like, trying to be more of a humble guy, even though he knows he doesn't fit that role really well. Tony is definitely a lot more arrogant. Bruce is trying to be more reserved. Thor is like just kind of like brute forcing his way through everything. It's cool. And I think it serves well to the basic themes of this movie because at its core, the themes are set up fairly well. Loki comes in with this idea that if humanity is left to its own devices, if they're given freedom, they're going to tear each other apart. So he says that subjugation is really the only true freedom because it allows them to focus on themselves as opposed to constantly competing with others. That's his mentality. And at first the Avengers do play into that idea because when they are just sort of led to just hang out with each other, they immediately start fighting. They immediately try to push to see who's the best, and they immediately start questioning each other and calling each other out. And instead of Loki being the one trying to control them, we actually see that S.H.I.E.L.D. ends up being the one that's sort of trying to rein them in. This idea that they're literally like forcing them to be together to make them into a team, and then lying to them about what their goal is. The whole idea that no, actually we're using the Tesseract that we want you to get for weapons programs. It's an interesting idea. And at the end of the day, it was getting close to being great, but it just kind of fell apart because at first it seems like a clear concept, okay? Self-control is the number one thing. You can't let other people control you, but you can't go crazy buck wild and start tearing everyone apart because you want to be the one on top. That's clear, right? But then Nick Fury still manipulates them by the end by using Coulson's death to push them to become a team. And it's kind of weird because it basically argues that no, the problem isn't that someone is controlling you, the problem is who's controlling you. The World Council's bad, Loki's bad, but Nick Fury's good, so you can trust him to just manipulate you and push you towards things because you need that push after all. You need someone to control you, at least a little bit. Which is weird because that's Loki's whole thing. That's his argument, and it kind of reinforces Loki's argument. I think it would be a lot more interesting if at the end the Avengers realized we don't need S.H.I.E.L.D., and rather than being motivated by Coulson's death or even Fury like manipulating them in any way, they just ran off and did their own thing. And Fury kind of realized, oh, I'm kind of the bad guy here. Sure, I brought these guys together, but I've been manipulating them to the same degree as everyone else has been trying to manipulate them, when I just need to let them be themselves, basically. They are chaotic and they are wild, but if they develop on their own, then they can become something great. That would be great. And the setup is there, like I said. I just think that one plot point of Fury lying about the Captain America cards being in Coulson's jacket felt very weird and very gross and kind of counteractive to the point of the movie. And when you have the World Council introduced in this movie as sort of being the higher-ups that Nick Fury has to answer to, it makes it seem like the problem isn't Fury, the problem is the World Council. And of course they're just a shady group of politicians because politicians are bad. That's like Marvel's always, that's their agenda in every movie. The military is good and the politicians are bad. Nick Fury is part of a little military branch out. He's good, but the politicians are bad. Even at the end, there's a Democrat from New York that's like, the Avengers need to be held accountable for their actions. And it's stupid because it's like, the politicians are the military, and the military are the politicians. There is a balance between them two. Sure, the individual soldiers aren't, but the whole concept of the military complex is approved by politicians. So why are they treating separate entities? It's if you're going to make a criticism against them, you should have something more nuanced than just they're shady and they're bad. And the military does good things by bringing freedom to people, because it's not very nuanced and it's not very true. And I think it's a very antiquated idea that comes associated with the concept of superheroes and the whole concept of them being like, these better men than women, these idea that they're the superhuman and therefore they are just inherently good. And the problem isn't them working together, the problem is them just simply being allowed to be better than everyone else. I don't know, it frustrates me. Overall though, again, like I said, it's a good movie. I don't dislike it. I really do appreciate a lot of elements of it. I think the acting is great. I think that the dialogue is great. I think that there's so many cool elements to this movie in the terms of like the little details, the way they keep ideas from previous movies, like like Iron Man's like laser thing that he uses, and like he chops off the one thing and drops a little like cartridge out of it. That was a cool little like moment, just a nice little thing to remind us of this past movie without being like, see guys, look it. Because it's like that's all movies are now. It's like there's so much like a in your face like, guys, look it, we're in the Thor the Dark World movie now. Isn't that cool? And it's like, no, it isn't. I don't care. It doesn't matter if it's just there. But when it's like a little background detail, it's something that you kind of have to look for. It's something that when you notice it, it's not like the movie's forcing it in your face, but it wants you to see it regardless. And so you feel a little bit more proud of being able to say like, hey, I saw that. That's cool. So overall, it's not terrible. But one thing I will say is that, again, adding on to my Iron Man 2 argument, Scarlett Johansson is not good in this movie. And I don't think she's good as Black Widow. I genuinely don't. I don't like hating on her, I really don't, but like, there were 3 different scenes where her whole character is supposed to be like acting. She's supposed to be either manipulating the Russian dude at the beginning, Bruce Banner a little after that, or Loki at a later point in the movie, and all 3 times, it doesn't feel like she's acting any differently than how she normally acts, which I guess you could say she's trying to manipulate them, but like the switch should be apparent. There should be a sense that she's always pretending and that there are moments where she reveals who she truly is and it's like drastically different. Because that gives you the idea that A, Black Widow is a morally ambiguous character, especially since you have people literally saying like, oh, you're a bad person and you have red on your ledger. And B, it would just make her more interesting. But instead it's like she's just kind of like this casual like, I'm Black Widow and I'm here to fight bad guys. Like there's no sense of like, she's even there. She's just kind of like along for the ride. Even the scene where she's like scared by the Hulk, you would hope that this would be a scene where it's like seeing her shaken like that is something we've never seen from her before, where she's not performing for anybody. But instead she's just kind of sitting there like and it's like, I get it. It doesn't have to be crazy extensive, but it still feels like a little lacking. And that's my rant about Black Widow. I don't know, who knows? I haven't seen her solo movie yet. Maybe I'll appreciate Scarlett Johansson a little more in that, but for now, it was stupid. So that's my Avengers thoughts. And I think we're going to wrap that up there. And hopefully you enjoyed this video. I hope you're enjoying rewatching these movies with me, if you are rewatching them with me, or at least discussing them with me. I always appreciate going back and questioning the things we like, as opposed to just like hating things that we hate. Because sometimes we find that, hey, maybe this can be improved, maybe we can do better. Especially for me, wanting to become a screenwriter, movies that I really enjoy, liking to see them and seeing go, oh, okay, I should maybe do something different than this and try to make it like a little bit more coherent while still keeping those elements of fun. It's something I really enjoy doing. Then I guess I'll see you in the next video. Bye.